The Witcher games tell you over and over again that Witchers have become rare, that their kind are near extinction. What the games don't tell you though, in fact what Witcher 3 lies to you about, is why. It's not for a silly reason like monsters becoming less common and the service of Witchers no longer being needed. No, there aren't many Witchers left on the path because Geralt killed them all. You might think I'm joking, and yeah, I kind of am, but what I don't think most realize is just how many Witchers Geralt has killed. That number is in the double digits, and apart from one, all happened during the games. There are 0 from the books, but once we get to the game trilogy, Geralt goes full Blaviken on almost every Witcher he meets. Wolf, Cat, Viper School, whoever, Geralt is an unproblematic fella who doesn't discriminate when it comes to chopping his fellow Witchers in half. And today, we're gonna go through each of Geralt's confirmed Witcher kills and dive deep into what led him to that kill. And for the ones that are optional and choice dependent, I also want to talk about whether Geralt actually would kill. For the record, just for my subscribers, I'm thinking of making a pillar of this channel be one big, high-production Witcher lore video each month or so. You know, just to mix in with the other content I've been doing, like game reviews and the other stuff I've been putting up. I'm not sure if there's a hunger for that, I assume you guys will let me know, but to be completely honest, I've always been very unsatisfied with most of the Witcher lore content that's out there. Most of it is just people reading off the wiki and missing 90% of what they're covering, so, well, let me know if you like this one.
You might even call me an aficionado.
Let's start with a fascinating Witcher with a story that spans from Witcher 1 all the way to Witcher 3. I'm talking about Berengar, another member of the Wolf School and a fellow former student of Vesemir that Geralt can cut down near the end of the first game.
Enough, traitor. I don't hear remorse, all I hear is self-pity.
Now, Berengar's story is something you'll miss approximately 80% of if you play Witcher 1 like a normal person would. At game start, Vesemir tells Geralt that there's a Witcher named Berengar somewhere in the world, which is super helpful, and from there, across the 30-40 hours you have left, fully putting together Berengar's story requires you to talk to dozens of random NPCs that, more often than not, have nothing to do with the main quest. That's just the way Witcher 1 is. You'll be chatting with some random peasant lady who sells croissants, and after 3 hours of croissant talk, she'll randomly say, "By the way, have you heard that another Witcher's rotting corpse is lying in the swamp?" And you'll think, wow, that seems like really important information that probably shouldn't be buried in a conversation about croissants, but it is, and by the way, that's more or less how Berengar's story goes for the first 20 hours of the game, at least the little scraps of it you can find. If you are truly committed to investigating what happened to Berengar, and if you talk to everyone you possibly can piece together that Berengar had recently accepted 2 different contracts, one to kill a beast and one to open a tower, but then he abandoned both for unknown reasons, leaving the mess for Geralt to clean up.
I'm a Witcher.
Eventually though, after being told by a few people that Berengar is probably lying dead in the swamp, Geralt just believes it after finding random unidentified bodies there. The quest even updates and says something definitive like, "Berengar is dead, sad news for Vesemir." But then, between a tip-off from an NPC and a note you can find on a body, you learn that Berengar was actually captured, not killed, by the group Geralt is hunting down, the Salamandra, the same criminals who had attacked Kaer Morhen, stole Witcher secrets, and then killed a Witcher in training named Leo, who Geralt had only just met. And by the way, you can find Leo's grave in The Witcher 3.
Leo's grave. A senseless death. Could have been avoided.
What's far more important than Berengar being alive, though, is what the end of the note reveals. Berengar wasn't just a mere captive of Salamandra, he'd been working for them, and his most recent task was to capture a young boy named Alvin for their brutal experiments. Experiments that were using a combination of the Witcher mutations they'd stolen, along with some black magic, with the hopes of creating the perfect mutant. And to way oversimplify who Alvin is, because it's not super relevant, he's essentially Witcher 1's version of Ciri. He's another child of destiny who falls under Geralt's care, so discovering that Berengar is after him completely changes Geralt's perspective. The search for Berengar shifts from finding a potential friend to protecting Alvin from a likely foe, and it's not long after this note can be found that Berengar finally enters the picture, for real and in person this time.
I've been looking for you, Berengar, for some time. I have some questions.
After all that searching over 30-35 hours of gameplay, you end up just running into Berengar in a random crypt outside the city of Vizima, which, for reference, is very close to where White Orchard is in Witcher 3. You can even see the city on the outskirts of the White Orchard map. Anyway, after clearing the crypt, Berengar is ready to talk after a moment of rest.
I can't meditate with the fire out. Seems I have to light it first.
Unfortunately, in this conversation, Berengar is about as honest as Zoltan is tall, so Geralt doesn't get much use out of him. Berengar claims he knew nothing of the attack on Kaer Morhen, and all that had happened was Salamandra found him, threatened him, but then he managed to escape before helping them in any way.
I didn't sell anyone out.
What Berengar says here doesn't really add up at all, so it's at this point that Geralt pulls out his iconic silver-plated School of the Wolf AK-47 and puts an end to Berengar, then and there. That's not true at all. Instead, Geralt just walks away after telling Berengar to stay away from Alvin, and that would be the end of Berengar's story if his conscience didn't get to him. After Geralt resolves an unrelated conflict, Berengar shows up again and confesses.
I betrayed Kaer Morhen's location to the Salamandra leader. Then I helped them with their research.
The reason Berengar had abandoned those two jobs I mentioned earlier was because Salamandra had caught up to him 2 separate times. During the first, he not only gave the location of Kaer Morhen over, leading to the death of Leo and the theft of the Witcher's secrets, but he also helped Salamandra with their research before leaving. Exactly how willing he was to work with them during their first run is a little unclear. I mean, Berengar does say in an earlier conversation that it was either work with them or die, but that was the conversation where everything else was a lie, and the note I mentioned before heavily implies that Berengar was working with them somewhat willingly the first time before giving them the slip. And Berengar even says himself that it wasn't until the second time they found him where things became a little less friendly.
They weren't as nice the second time around.
Now, if you're wondering why Berengar would even think of betraying his fellow Witchers somewhat willingly, he's one of those Witchers who is very angry about what was done to him, being forced as a child to watch his friends die as he was subjected to the brutal Witcher trials that only 3 out of 10 survive. Berengar mentions time and time again how that still makes him so angry. He's a lot like Lambert in that way.
Think it's that bad being a Witcher?
Guess I could have been someone worse. Just a shame I had no choice.
Never had a choice, with them or you. The Witchers made me a mutant. The Professor made me a criminal. An outcast twice over.
Anyway, the second time Salamandra nabbed Berengar when they told him to capture Alvin, he refused to help them. He told them he would, so they'd let him go, but instead he left and continued formulating his plan to make things right, which he doesn't say out loud, and at this point, Geralt knows nothing of that plan, so let's take a pause. It's in this conversation where you can choose to kill Berengar, and to be clear, all Geralt knows is that Berengar did betray the Witcher secrets and actively work with Salamandra, not to mention it was at least partially his fault that Leo died because of that betrayal, but he also knows that Berengar had stopped working with the group and had made no attempt at capturing Alvin when he had many opportunities to do so. Most important of all though, Geralt knows that Berengar manned up and went out of his way to confess what he'd done in person. That takes a lot, and I don't think Geralt would provoke Berengar into a fight here. There's very little sense in it, as Berengar has clearly turned a page, and if you do end up killing him, this is all Geralt has to say afterwards.
Unnecessary duel. Unnecessary death.
It is worth noting that if you kill Berengar, the note on his body that you don't see otherwise puts a lot into perspective. Berengar very clearly is super insecure. He thinks of himself as a coward and was scared out of his wits by the Salamandra. And also, it's this note that reveals that Berengar was cooking up some sort of plan to set things right and recover the Witcher secrets. In the case that you spared him, you see that plan in action. When Geralt confronts Azar Javed, a very powerful mage in the Salamandra who holds the Witcher secrets, Berengar also arrives as he intended to overcome his fear of the mage and help Geralt kill him.
Your threats don't impress me anymore. Prepare, sorcerer. I've come here for you.
Unfortunately, Berengar instantly dies during this fight, like he's not helpful at all and goes down in about 5 seconds, but it's the thought that counts, I guess. Fun fact though, it is technically possible to save him if you drink all the right potions and also get really, really lucky, but I don't think that was intended, or at least I don't think you were meant to take him surviving seriously, because if he does live, nothing changes. The journal doesn't update to mention him surviving, and all he'll say afterwards is this.
I needed to think.
Which is just a repeated quote from before the boss fight, and whatever the case, Witcher 3 treats Berengar as being dead and in the ground. Most of you probably know this, but Berengar gets his own little secret quest called Berengar's Blade in Witcher 3, which you can start by looting a completely unremarkable chest outside Kaer Morhen. Inside it, you'll find a note from Berengar that mentions a sword he was forging.
How about that? He was working on a sword. And not just any sword, judging by his notes. Torhan.
This note does retcon Witcher 1 a little bit, because in it, Berengar talks about knowing Geralt, even though Vesemir says outright that neither Geralt nor Eskel nor Lambert had ever met him.
Did I know him?
I don't believe so. An introvert, he chose his own path. Actually, none here can say they know Berengar.
Berengar had written that note while at Kaer Morhen, which he never returned to after dying, believe it or not, so something doesn't add up there. Anyway, the rest of the quest is just talking to Vesemir about what you found and then finding the diagram for the sword Berengar was trying to forge.
Forging the Torhairn won't be easy, but it's sure as hell worth a try.
Okay, let's move on to our second Witcher kill, the Mysterious Assassin, a Witcher who only properly appears in one single cutscene that sets up The Witcher 2. In this cutscene, Geralt goes to Foltest, the king of Temeria, to collect payment he's owed, and while leaving, he puts a stop to an assassination attempt. The twist, after having killed the assassin, Geralt pulls down his mask and realizes that who he just killed was a fellow Witcher. I find this one in particular so interesting because of the way Witcher 2 treats the assassin, and in saying that, I want to bring up the next 2.5 Witcher kills into the picture, Ox, Letho, and Seret. I bring them up because you might notice in the assassin cutscene that the assassin isn't wearing a Witcher medallion to identify what school he's from, and I want to quickly talk about who this assassin likely is and who Geralt likely killed here in relation to his next 2.5 kills. Now, one thing that might surprise you about The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings is that in it, kings get assassinated by Witchers. How this comes to be goes back to even before the events of Witcher 1. Long story short, no book spoilers, but Yennefer and Geralt were living their best life on the Isle of Avalon, or Avallac'h because Witcher 2 refers to it as that for some reason.
I've been to the Isle of Avallac'h, among the apple trees and the mists.
It's called the Isle of Avalon everywhere else in the Witcher franchise.
Once you'd left Yen and me on the Isle of Avalon.
But anyway, the Wild Hunt appeared on that island and abducted Yennefer, leaving Geralt to, of course, go after her. He traveled back to the continent, going deeper and deeper south, following the Wild Hunt's trail, and after months of searching to no avail, he ended up coming across and saving a Viper Skull Witcher named Letho from a Slizzard. Out of gratitude, Letho and his 2 companions, Ox and Seret, joined Geralt on his search, and I want to stress, because it's really important, there were 2 companions.
He had 2 comrades, brother Witchers from the School of the Viper.
The search continued south, deep into Nilfgaard, before they finally caught up to the hunt and Yennefer. And in the one short cutscene about this encounter where Geralt trades himself for Yen's freedom, you can see in the far background of one specific shot that Letho, Seret, and Ox are joined by a third figure, who I can only assume is the Witcher assassin who tried and failed to kill Foltest. This is important because, honestly, it makes the way Witcher 2 deals with the assassin really, really strange, at least in my opinion. During the prologue, when Geralt is serving as a bodyguard to Foltest because Foltest was so grateful to Geralt for having saved his life, a short conversation with Triss sets up the mystery of the assassin a little further. Essentially, Triss wanted to get her hands on the Witcher's corpse to learn more, but Foltest's men called first dibs, and while performing their autopsy, they somehow botched it so badly that by the time Triss was able to take a look, there wasn't much left of the guy.
What arrived in that cart? Well, I wouldn't even call it a corpse.
All Triss was able to learn was that the assassin was probably a Witcher, and I mean, thank God Detective Triss was on the case. Without her, there's no way we could have figured that one out. From there, though, Geralt really wants to learn more about who he was, but unfortunately for Geralt, the mystery assassin plotline is completely dropped after the prologue, and I can't stress enough how weird it is that this doesn't come up again, especially when you consider what Witcher 2 is all about. It's in the title, and I have a theory here, which I'll get to in a bit. It is worth mentioning that there are a couple of passing references to the first assassin early in Act 1, where Geralt just mentions having stopped him and how he's trying to figure out who he is, but then he meets the man he knows has the answers, Letho, and just never bothers to ask. Remember, in Witcher 2, Geralt doesn't have his memories. He loses them after escaping the hunt and arriving at Kaer Morhen, which is at the start of the first game, so Geralt doesn't know that he knows Letho, and until recently, Letho didn't know that Geralt doesn't know that Letho knew him. What Geralt does know, though, is that he thwarted one assassination attempt against Foltest before a second Witcher assassin, Letho, succeeded and framed Geralt in the process. So when Geralt gets a chance to talk to Letho at length, which he does in the first act, well, it's crazy to me that Geralt doesn't think to ask who the other Witcher assassin was, but I suppose you could excuse it there because Geralt was just framed for the death of a king and he needs to clear his name. Priorities. What I can't fully understand, though, is why the ending of Witcher 2 handles this plotline the way it does, and that brings me to Ox and Seret, because these all tie together. The death of Ox is another Witcher kill you aren't given a choice with, at least not directly. While at the camp of King Henselt, King of Kedwin, Letho's 2 fellow Kingslayers, Seret and Ox, or attempted Kingslayers I should say, show up to kill Henselt while he's speaking with Geralt. This doesn't go well for Ox. Geralt cuts him down while Seret manages to barely escape, injured from the fight. At this point, Geralt still doesn't have his memories, so he doesn't realize he just killed a friend, someone he knew well, and it's kinda tragic. I mean, Ox not only helped him search for and save Yennefer from the hunt, but he also helped care for Yennefer after Geralt traded himself for her freedom. After Ox's death, though, to learn more about Letho and why they're killing kings in the first place, it's decided by Geralt and one of Henselt's mages to perform a bit of black magic to delve into Ox's memories. For a reason that's very important, though, a sorceress named Sheila de Tanzerville objects to this.
Count me out.
As the common folk say, be at ease, the woman's gone.
Sheila makes it seem like she's just offended by what they're going to attempt, necromancy, but she's completely full of shit in acting that way. In reality, Sheila was trying to stop Geralt from learning of her involvement with the royal assassinations, which Seret knew about, and while Geralt is delving into Ox's memories, Sheila flees and tracks Seret to silence him and make sure he doesn't survive his injuries. Once Geralt learns what she was up to via Ox's memories, though, he sets off behind her.
They said Sheila de Tanzerville was an accomplice in the murder.
This next part is a little weird and slightly messy in my opinion, because Geralt gets to their Witcher hideout after Sheila had already been there and left, yet Seret is still alive. She had one job, but between the fight with Geralt and then Sheila, he expires after talking about the last time he and Geralt were allies, the night they saved Yennefer.
We didn't want to leave you.
What are you talking about?
Nearly made it. Just think. The Wild Hunt. We could have freed the world of the omen of war.
Think about what really happened here. Geralt killed Ox and had a direct hand in Seret's death, we'll give him the assist, but he did that while not knowing that they were his friends, that they did a lot for both him and Yennefer. Not that Geralt did anything wrong necessarily, but that's kind of a huge plot point. I mean, if you pick up the note on Seret's body, which is all about Geralt and was written back when they were traveling together, Seret ends the note by saying, "I hope I get the chance to know Geralt better and learn from him. Nothing specific, just life." Similarly, in the Ox memory that Geralt witnesses, there's another moment with him and Seret where you can tell they still care about Geralt, even though he doesn't remember them and they're now, by pure circumstance, on opposite sides.
The White Wolf has arrived at the Kedweni camp with Vernon Roach.
Looks like he's Henselt's lackey now.
I'd rather Henselt used others as his lackeys.
I thought he was hanged for killing Foltest.
You want him hanged?
No.
If you're thinking, oh boy, I can't wait to see where this goes when Geralt eventually realizes he killed his friends, well, don't get too excited because nothing happens and it's never referenced again. Geralt's memory comes back near the very end of the game, at the end of a long conversation with Letho, where they hash everything out. Before Geralt's memories return, though, in this 20-plus minute conversation, you'd sure think Geralt would ask who the Witcher he killed protecting Foltest was, or who Ox and Seret were to him, but again, Geralt just doesn't ask, and Letho talks about Ox and Seret like they're still alive.
Besides Seret and Ox, I know of 2 other Witchers of the School of the Viper who should be alive and on the path.
On the Witcher assassin specifically, well, you learn from Letho that while he and the others were caring for Yennefer throughout Nilfgaard, they were eventually captured, and Letho was very specific as to who was with him when that happened.
Then one day they captured us. The Imperial Secret Police. Me, Ox, Seret, and Yennefer.
You might have noticed that there was no mention of the other Witcher that was there when they saved Yen from the Wild Hunt, so what happened to him? Who was he? Why did that Witcher end up attempting an assassination if he wasn't there when they were captured? Because, if you don't remember, the assassinations were commissioned by the Emperor of Nilfgaard after his men captured Letho, Ox, Seret, and Yennefer. Emir went to the Viper School Witchers they'd captured and said, hey, if you go kill some kings for me to weaken the north before I invade, I'll give you funding to rebuild the School of the Viper. That was the whole motivation behind the assassinations. It's why in Witcher 3, Letho is on the run and trying to fake his death, because Emir didn't keep his word.
Emperor just decided to get rid of me. I'm an inconvenient witness after all. I've run into loads of men out to kill me ever since I left Loch Muin.
So my theory, or on second thought calling this a theory is way overselling it, but I think CDPR just forgot about the mystery assassin when they were writing the ending of Witcher 2. The nice thing, though, is that if they remake Witcher 2 after 1, they could fix or just explain this in some way. Like, maybe the assassin left Letho's group after they rescued Yennefer, but before they were captured, and he was then brought in on the assassinations and the plan to rebuild the Viper School afterwards. I mean, in the official Gwent card for the mystery assassin, you can clearly see that he's wearing a Viper medallion, so he definitely is of the School of the Viper, and I think it would be an insane stretch to try and claim that the third figure in that one cutscene isn't him. And either way, even if you're a gold medal mental gymnast, it still makes zero sense that neither Letho nor Geralt would ever bring him up.
My final prank.
As to whether Geralt would kill Letho after their conversation, I talk about this a lot more in my Every Choice Geralt Would Make video that I did for The Witcher 2, but I really don't think he would. Geralt says something like, "Your death would change nothing when you choose not to kill him," and that's exactly right. By the time Geralt has to make this decision, cutting him down accomplishes absolutely zero, and Letho just wants to go his own way. Geralt has cleared his name. Letho didn't intend to frame Geralt in the first place. It was just a wrong place, wrong time scenario, and it's right before he makes his choice that all of his memories come flooding back, and Geralt has a lot to think about. In my opinion, walking away from Letho here makes way more sense for Geralt than another fight to the death, especially when you consider that Letho had completely kicked his ass and spared him the last time they crossed blades.
You were one of us, Geralt. You saved us. Now we're even.
Before moving on to Witcher 3, which has the highest Witcher kill count, I should mention that if you played Witcher 2 and you've been thinking, wait, when did I fight 2 Witchers and kill one? Well, the reason I said you're not really given a choice with that one is because it happens if you side with Roach early in the game, and if you do that, fighting them is unavoidable. It's part of the main story. If you choose Yorvith and do his storyline though, you never meet Serret or Ox at all. You just hear later from Roach that both died. One was killed when their hideout was raided, and the other died a very gruesome death.
One was taken alive. Before he died from torture, he revealed that our bruiser went to Loch Muin.
I did also mention at the beginning of this video that Geralt killed one Witcher outside of the games, and I was talking about this super obscure one-off comic from way before even the first game came out, a time before running water and electricity, the 1990s. In that comic, it's called The Betrayal, and it's only available in Polish, Geralt gets tricked into killing a friend of his named Gweld, a Witcher that, as far as I know, was invented just for that comic, and to be honest, the whole comic is very weird, which is also true of some of CDPR's Witcher comics that are much more recent. I've been toying with the idea of making a big video on those because they range from really, really good to,
I prefer really not to speak. If I speak, I am in big trouble. In big trouble.
For now, I may revisit that idea in a couple of months after a few other videos, but anyway, let's talk about the first of 4 Witchers Geralt kills or can kill in The Witcher 3, Jad Karadin.
He's a Witcher. Very true.
The case of Jad Karadin is a lot simpler than, say, Berengar or the Assassin, because it's all contained to one quest, and if you don't remember, by the time of Witcher 3, Jad Karadin is a resident of Novigrad, who was a member of one of the original 3 Witcher schools.
That of the cat. So few of us left.
I say 3 original Witcher schools because in the books, there only are 3, at least only 3 mentioned, Wolf, Cat, and Manticore. In fact, that's something that even carries forward into the first game.
There were 3 Witcher schools in all, but it's been long since I've heard word of the other 2.
That's yet another moment that'll probably be changed in the remake, but anyway, Geralt himself has no connection or awareness of Jad prior to this one meeting we see. As you probably remember, before this meeting, Lambert and Geralt had connected by chance while both were in Novigrad. Outside the city, Lambert made Geralt aware of a guy named Jad Karadin and his former group of mercenaries who had apparently killed a friend of Lambert's years ago.
I had a friend. Aiden was his name.
You had a friend?
Oh, fucking hilarious.
It's worth noting that Lambert wasn't there at the time of Aiden's death. He just tells Geralt what he'd heard way after the fact, and one detail Lambert had been told was that it was Jad Karadin who landed the killing blow. Lambert wants revenge on more than just him though, and he gets it. He cuts down one former member of the group in cold blood, which Geralt clearly doesn't think much of, and he also cuts down a second member of Karadin's group off-screen when Geralt isn't around, because, as Lambert puts it,
well, didn't have you there to stand up for her.
Anyway, going into the meeting with Karadin, there are many question marks as to who the guy even is. For one, it's not until the meeting itself that Geralt and Lambert find out that Jad is a fellow Witcher. That's how little they knew about him going in, but in their time before the meeting, when they'd tracked down some of the other yet-to-be-mentioned members of his band, well, those meetings had made it somewhat unclear as to what Jad had really been up to since apparently leaving the mercenary Band of Bandits life behind somewhat long ago. According to Vienne, a former Scoia'tael archer who'd been part of his group, The word around Novigrad was that Karadin had really cleaned up his act and started over as a highly respected and honest merchant who was apparently very charitable. A man named Hammond, though, Yad's former right-hand man who Geralt sailed all the way to Skellige to talk to, raised a lot of questions about Karadin's current business practices. Geralt finds out that after Karadin's group broke apart, Hammond became a Skelligan slaver, one who imports people from the continent, and Lambert, in his separate travels, discovered that at one point, or maybe even currently, or at least currently as of that quest taking place, Yad had owned, or maybe still owned, a ship named the Pearl of the Coast that was supposedly used for transport in Hammond's operation. Unfortunately though, Geralt isn't able to get much useful information out of Hammond, at least not directly. The guy attacks Geralt almost immediately, but Geralt does find a note from Karadin on Hammond's body, where he had told Hammond that he wanted nothing to do with the new operation in Skellige. Karadin claims that he'd left his old immoral ways behind, and he never wanted Hammond to contact him again. Is that note genuine, or was it a cover-up sent ahead of Geralt's arrival to make it seem like he'd changed? Because, as you find out when Lambert and Geralt arrive at his estate, Karadin had heard about the two of them poking into his past.
You've been asking many questions about me. That always draws my attention.
As for the note being a fake, because the theory that it's a cover-up is very common, and I've seen a lot of people say it is one, like that's a fact, but the only fact of this matter is that we don't know if it's a cover-up. My take, and this is just my take, but I've always thought that theory makes almost no sense. I mean, what would the plan there be, exactly? Is the idea that Karadin heard two Wolf School Witchers were digging into his past, so he sent a fake letter to Hammond ahead of Geralt, and that letter, I guess, had a medieval post-it note attached to it that said, "Dear Hammond, someone who's after me is going to come poking around our operation in the next couple of weeks. He's a Witcher and you're just a random guy. Killing you and all of your men will be no problem, so I'm gonna need you to carry around this fake note that makes me look like a changed man so he can loot it off your corpse and my name will be cleared. Lots of love, tell the wife I said hi, your friend, Yad." It's a matter of opinion, I suppose, but that seems like a pretty stupid plan to me with many better alternatives. I mean, if Karadin had time to send a note ahead trying to cover things up, why do Hammond's men immediately tell him what they're up to?
If it's slaves you're looking to buy, you'll have to wait till he's done.
I just think the note theory is a pretty mixed bag, and if that was really the best Karadin could come up with, I mean, come on man, what a stupid plan. Overall though, there's just a bit of messiness throughout the entire Jad Karadin questline, which is really rare for Witcher 3, but for example, if you sail to Skellige before taking on the mission from Lambert and go to Hammond's camp, you can experience a completely unique little quest called Flesh for Sale that is otherwise unavailable. In this quest, Geralt can pose as an Nilfgaardian who's supposed to be picking up some Skelligan captives, and then, in the end, free them without raising the alarm if you play things well.
You're free. Go west. You'll reach a village.
Thank you, Witcher. Thank you once more.
It's awesome that this quest even exists, but it's the sort of thing you'd usually expect Witcher 3 to account for, and it usually would account for, you know, that you had already been to Hammond's camp and fooled or killed his men. In this case, though, the game just kinda breaks, because if you start Lambert's quest afterwards and return to the camp seeking Hammond, you'll see that in the background the slavers will start attacking you, because presumably the real Nilfgaardians showed up and they realized what had happened. You'll notice, though, that on approach, the guards you normally talk to if you hadn't already been there aren't there. But then the cutscene will start anyway. They'll appear out of nowhere and talk to you as if you hadn't already met, the dialogue has no changes, and then once the cutscene is over, they'll just disappear into nothingness. And I think that mild messiness carries over to the ending of Jad Karadin's questline too, which we'll get to in about 10 seconds. Anyway, to return to Karadin's note before moving on, if we're assuming it's genuine, or at least giving him a small sliver of the benefit of the doubt, the question then becomes, was Karadin ever involved with Hammond's operation? And the answer there is, we don't know for sure, and more importantly, Geralt doesn't. There is no concrete proof he was or was not, and unfortunately, I think the writing of the one conversation with Karadin kinda drops the ball there, because neither Lambert nor Geralt ask or confront him about it, which really sticks out. It's awkward that they don't, but it is what it is. That brings me to Karadin's family, though, who are outside with him for a little bit after Geralt and Lambert arrive, and the reason I bring them up is because another common theory is that Karadin's wife and child are also a ruse, that because Karadin knew Lambert and Geralt were going to catch up to him at some point, he took a random woman and 2 children, or maybe women from his dealings with Hammond, and made them pretend to be his family for sympathy points. Now, this theory could be true, definitely, but it does drive me a little crazy to see it presented as a cold, hard fact when there's not anything significant to back it up. What people say is evidence comes down to a few things. One, the family doesn't talk for like the 20 seconds they're with Karadin before it becomes clear Lambert is out for blood. Personally, I don't think that's evidence of anything. Two, the wife looks scared when we see her, and I mean, she could be scared of Karadin, sure, but she could also be scared because two witchers, one of whom is clearly bloodlusted, just walked into their backyard to confront her husband. Her husband, who has a checkered past she knows about if she's really his wife.
I confessed all just before we pledged to marry one another. Began a new life that day, with a clean slate.
The final piece of evidence is that if you roll around on the Novigrad rooftops after going to Skellige, but before getting Lambert for the meeting, you can get into Karadin's estate and see that he's in his yard by himself, with no family around at the moment. Again, I don't really agree with that being evidence. I mean, you can also get into his estate before starting the quest at all and see that his yard is full of children's toys, so is that undeniable proof that he's a committed family man? No, that's just how the yard is made up for when you're supposed to be there during the quest. You can also complete the mission where you find Ciri, but then right after return to Crow's Perch and ask a little girl named Gretka where Ciri is and what happened to her. Is that proof that Geralt is canonically suffering from crippling dementia? I mean, maybe, but more likely is that it's just a small thing in a video game that wasn't cleaned up, and that's okay. Anyway, that brings us to the final bit of the conversation with Karadin. What Lambert had been told was that the death of his friend Aiden came about after he accepted a contract to lift a curse that some apparently didn't want lifted due to some vague political reasons they had, so they hired Jad Karadin and his band to take Aiden out before he could even attempt lifting it. Karadin's story is different though, and by the way, this is the only topic we've touched on that you can talk to Karadin about. The family might be fake thing is never suspected by anyone in-game. All Geralt mentions is that witchers are sterile.
Witchers can't have children.
But they can have wards, or take in a woman along with her children, embrace them as their own.
That might sound a bit familiar to someone like Geralt. Anyway, Karadin's story is that Aiden had been hired to lift a curse, but instead of Karadin's group being contracted to kill him for some political reason like Lambert said, they'd been hired as debt collectors. Aiden had taken this job to lift a girl's curse, was paid for it, but then bungled the job and feared retribution, or maybe just needed the coin, so he fled. By the time they caught up with him, the money had been spent, so they demanded his swords as repayment.
When he refused, tempers flared. Vienne, positioned as a sniper, lost her nerve. Hit Aiden square in the eye.
That's it, that's all you get, time to make a choice, even though, in my opinion, there are several other questions that really should be asked here. For the record, there's nothing about Karadin's version of events that can be outright proven or disproven. The elf that Karadin said had accidentally killed Aiden sure seemed to fit the profile of his story, as she's deeply depressed and feels very guilty about something. She spends her days wasting away in a tavern and doesn't care whether she lives or dies. And also, it does seem pretty unlikely that Jad, a School of the Cat Witcher, would kill another Cat Witcher in cold blood, because if I haven't mentioned it yet, Aiden was a Cat Witcher too, and they're known for being fiercely loyal to one another. But to support the other side of things, Lambert's description of Aiden made him seem like a truly stand-up guy, better than Geralt according to him, so you wouldn't think Aiden would handle the situation the way Karadin had laid out. Not to mention that a Scoia'tael archer losing her nerve and accidentally firing off a shot also seems pretty unlikely.
One thing is sure. Elves are the best archers who have ever walked this earth.
The picture I'm trying to paint here is that, in my opinion, there are just way too many question marks for Geralt to kill this fellow Witcher in cold blood, or to even be involved with the killing. And if you do kill him, I think this interaction says it all.
Thanks for your help, Geralt.
You're welcome.
Want to talk about it?
No.
Geralt doesn't know if he just killed or helped kill a horrible man with a slimy-sounding voice, or a changed one who wasn't guilty of anything worse than what almost every Cat School Witcher is guilty of. The only thing you know for sure is that Jad was a mercenary in the past, and though the other Witcher schools frown on it, that's just who Cat School Witchers are, unfortunately. They're banned from Kaer Morhen because many, or most of them, became mercenaries who would take human contracts. In the books, Geralt even comes across a Cat School Witcher named Brienne, who he knows did something horrible. He committed a huge massacre in the city of Yalo that caused all other Witchers to shun him. And Brienne also grabs a priestess and threatens to kill her right in front of Geralt. But does Geralt kill Brienne? No, he says that if the priestess is harmed, he will, and that if he hears of Brienne doing anything like that massacre again, he'll hunt him down, but in the moment, he just tells him to get out of his sight, and that's someone that Geralt knows for a fact did something awful and had made no attempt at changing. To be completely honest, the ending of Karadin's quest, in my opinion, is just a little bit frustrating. I mean, the big question surrounding Karadin is, has he cleaned up his act, or is he deeply involved in the world of Novigrad crime? That question really sticks out because you may remember, if you played Witcher 3, that a huge portion of the main quest is all about Novigrad's criminal underworld. In fact, Geralt is on relatively good terms with 3 of the 4 crime bosses in the city, so go ask Cleaver, go ask the King of Beggars, or most obvious and important, go ask Dijkstra about Jad Karadin. If he's doing what Lambert thinks he is in Novigrad, in the middle of Novigrad, then there's no way Dijkstra wouldn't know about it. He has men everywhere and shows Geralt time and time again that nothing happens in that city without him knowing about it.
Probably shouldn't ask, but Dijkstra, how the hell do you know all this?
I draw it all from the flight patterns of birds.
Now, of course, The Witcher 3 can't account for everything ever that should realistically happen, but this quest has always seemed to me like one that really wanted to be morally ambiguous, at least relative to the Witcher world, but the only way for it to actually stay that way to the end was for the conversation with Karadin to avoid several things that would definitely be brought up, and for Geralt to not use any of his connections around Novigrad to quickly and easily figure out what Jad had truly been up to after breaking up his mercenary group. Just my opinion, and it's not a bad quest by any means, just not really a favorite of mine. One that is, though, is the Catskill Witcher Kiyan's questline, but before we move on to that one, I do want to take a quick second to thank today's sponsor, Factor, who at this point are a channel staple as they're the only meal delivery service you'll ever need, and they're what I use almost every week. I've been personally ordering Factor for the past 6 months at this point because doing so has solved every food problem I've ever had. Factor meals are fresh and never frozen, but by far what's most important to me is that every meal I've had has somehow been healthy, convenient, and really good, which I had thought was an impossible combination pre-Factor. I just don't have time to cook every day, or most days really. I barely have time to think, and most convenient foods are either unhealthy, extremely expensive, or just mind-numbingly boring, but Factor is none of those things, and it's truly changed my health for the better this past half year, as I'm eating what I should be every single day without burning hours I just don't have cooking and cleaning. Factor delivers the meals to your front door each week, and when hungry, just pop them in the microwave for 2 minutes or the oven for 8, and you're good to go. You have 30 plus options to choose from each week, your order is fully customizable, and to get started, head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code NEON50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus 20% off your next box as well. That said, just know that you won't be locked in or committed to anything past that first one, so I'm just personally recommending give that heavily discounted first box a try, and you won't be disappointed.
So, do I spoon feed you?
So, the Witcher Kiyan story is something of a tragic one, depending on how you personally feel about torture and putting heads in jars. Spread across Velen and Novigrad are several notes that document the decisions Kiyan made that led to him being transformed from a normal School of the Cat Witcher into the monster Geralt comes across in an elven ruin. Long story short, Kiyan, like many Catskill Witchers, had pretty loose morals, so he accepted a contract any Witcher with a conscience would turn down in a heartbeat. This contract involved him joining an expedition that was being funded by a prince named Adrian, a prince with a horrible reputation, but this expedition was instead a planned massacre. Adrian had assembled a team of experts to recover a handful of priceless diagrams from an ancient elven ruin, and the prince had also hired Kiyan to join the expedition as a bodyguard to the team. At least, that's what the expeditioners thought, but what Kiyan was really there for was to kill each and every one of them after they'd recovered the diagrams, which is exactly what he did, outside of missing one expeditioner who jumped into a portal that left him directly behind a wall. You can even find that guy's skeletonized body as Geralt. Anyway, Kiyan reported back to the prince with each of the expeditioners' heads in a jar, something the prince did not request and thought was demented, though he still offered Kiyan a job as his personal bodyguard, which Kiyan turned down in favor of another shady job aboard the Flying Stag. Angry that Kiyan refused his offer, Aiden cursed, or at least attempted to curse Kiyan, to a life of misfortune. Whether or not he was successful, because the prince wasn't a mage himself, which doesn't really matter in the Witcher universe, we see from characters like Ostrit and Olgierd that anyone can curse anyone, but whether his curse was successful or not, Kiyan's life was already over after walking away from Adrian. He just didn't know it yet. Aboard the Flying Stag, one passenger they ended up transporting was a mage named Steingard, who had noticed Kiyan and thought he'd be a prime specimen for some experiments he was planning. He knocked Kiyan out, conjured up a storm to wreck the ship and cover his tracks, and teleported both of them to his laboratory. There, for 26 consecutive days, Steingard broke Kiyan. He had him poisoned, burnt, starved, dehydrated, and all matter of other, less than pleasant things until Kiyan was a shell of himself, a man who ate and drank on his own and spoke simple words like please and stop, but was ultimately nothing more than a subservient shell of himself, though still alive. And that version of Kiyan is what Geralt comes across in Steingard's laboratory underneath Novigrad.
No good, no evil, only pain. Seems you are bleeding.
This kill is unique in that it's a mercy takedown. Kiyan is nothing but a husk by the time Geralt comes across him, and ending his life, existence, whatever you want to call it, is definitely just a mercy. As for what happened to the maid, Steingard, well, it's not confirmed, but I assume Kiyan killed him. You find Steingard's notes on Kiyan's body, and, I mean, why else would Kiyan have those unless Steingard is dead? I suppose the mage could have died some other way other than Kiyan just breaking rank and killing him, or maybe Steingard just left his lab and research behind, but guessing is the best we can do because it's never said outright. I will say I think it would be really cool to run into Kiyan as a prime healthy Witcher in one of CDPR's upcoming games, especially if he ends up being a friend. That would be pretty interesting knowing his future. Anyway, we're down to the final two, and I suppose it's time we talk about Reinald.
You dare mock me?
Now, Reinald was introduced with the next-gen update in the quest In the Eternal Fire's Shadow, and in the lead-up to the kill, while in Velen, Geralt comes across a young priest of the Eternal Fire, one who seems significantly more open-minded than most members.
Thought your church frowned upon our kind. Mutants.
A mistake common in our ranks, alas. I discussed it at length with my mentor. All are capable of doing good in this world, genetic aberrations or not.
You sure you're a priest of the Eternal Fire?
Now, the Eternal Fire are a pretty disgusting religion within the Witcher universe. They started as the cult of the Eternal Fire, but by the time of Witcher 3, they'd grown in popularity and were upgraded to the Church. But to not get too deep into unrelated lore, their witch hunters are largely responsible for carrying out the massacre of non-humans and mages that we see in the third game. And the priests and deacons themselves are consistently shown to be pathetic, immoral slime balls. One in Velen is involved in the trade of fist tech, a reverend from the outskirts in Witcher 1 cast his daughter out into the street for a disgusting reason, and in Novigrad they're all over the place and never leave a good impression.
How many people's lives have you saved? From Bruxay? From Leshens?
That has no bearing.
Asked you a question. How many?
Anyway, this young priest Geralt comes across is clearly different. He's on his first ever mission and is so obviously ignorant of the evils carried out by the Eternal Fire that, well, he might not be the sharpest sword in Kaer Morhen's armory, that's all I'm saying. That might be a little unfair. Actually, the Eternal Fire are known for preying on vulnerable young people and sweeping them into their ranks with nothing but lies, but anyway, Geralt is needed because a nearby pit holds the entrance to a mine that deep within contains... Well, that's just it. The priest doesn't really know anything other than it's dangerous and very, very old.
Someone, that is something, lurks there, so ancient records show.
As it turns out, once Geralt has traversed into the mine, that thing is a Witcher. Sort of. A Witcher whose body Geralt frees and speaks to at length.
Reinald?
Yes, but... my strength... fading. The spirit... taking control.
Who Geralt is speaking to here isn't really Reinald, though. It's the spirit of the mine trying to fool Geralt into handing over a potion. And once the spirit has been dealt with and Reinald's body thoroughly destroyed in the process, the two of them have a chat with Reinald in spirit form this time. And, well, the question is, does Reinald even belong in this video? I mean, if I didn't at least have a short section on him, every other comment would be, you forgot about Reinald, so I included him. But really, by the time he meets Geralt, Reinald had already been dead for years. It was just the spirit preserving his vital functions while also trapping Reinald's consciousness and spirit inside his own body. And during their fight, Geralt didn't exactly kill Reinald, he just freed his spirit from his body, which, now that I'm thinking about it, sounds like a really nice way to say killed. Your Honor, when I stabbed that man 95 times, I had no intention of killing him. I only meant to free his spirit from his body. You gotta believe me. Anyway, sorry, the choice with this quest is unrelated to killing Reinald. Essentially, the Eternal Fire were the ones responsible for him rotting in the mine all those years. They had trapped him and many others inside, so Reinald wants vengeance in the form of Geralt bringing him the young priest.
This kid, he's got no ties to the clerics who sealed you in here centuries ago.
Can you offer me them in his stead? No. Thought not.
As to whether Geralt would bring the priest to Reinald, I really lean towards no. Reinald has hundreds of years of pent-up anger, which he's not even trying to hide. And if you bring the priest down there, Reinald clearly intended to kill him, although he can be talked down, but make one wrong move and...
Lies. Selfish lies to save your skin. Folk don't change. Not ever.
Reinald, calm down.
So that brings us to Geralt's most famous Witcher kill, and the last one for today, Gaetan, the Catskool Witcher who cut down an entire village's worth of people in Velen after their alderman and a couple of his men tried to kill him with a pitchfork in the barn. Geralt stumbles upon the immediate aftermath as well as the one little girl he spared, and then has to decide whether Gaetan lives or dies. And, well, that's pretty much the entire story. There's not really any other lore on Gaetan. His character is all about the choice and what he did in the hour before Geralt met him. We know next to nothing about his past, so if you're just wanting to hear about that choice, that moment specifically from Geralt's perspective and what he'd most likely do, I just covered it in the Hearts of Stone Every Choice Geralt Would Make video that I did like 2 or 3 months ago. I can't do a better job than I did in that video, so I'll just link where I covered it there in the description if you're interested. Anyway, that is all for today, and if you made it to the end, I would really love your feedback on this one, as I just want to gauge interest in me doing more Witcher lore videos in between my reviews and other game videos I've been posting. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, as that's how YouTube decides which videos are worthy of being blessed by the algorithm. If you like what I'm doing here, feel free to subscribe. If you use Twitter, consider following me there. And that's all. See ya.